Welcome to Conversations With. My name is Shaley Hoogendoorn and I live with bipolar 2 disorder. Sharing with others is healing, both individually and collectively. Sharing our stories will educate others, bring more understanding, shed more light, and smash more stigma. Our voices need to be heard. Our stories aren't over yet. This is Bipolar. Hi everyone, welcome back to This is Bipolar. I am your host, Shaley Hoogendoorn. I am a mom, I am a substitute teacher, and I am a mental health advocate. I live with bipolar 2 disorder, and I'm really excited to have my guest, Gabe Howard. I met him on a panel with Rudy Caceres, and he was hilarious, and I was really excited to get to know more of his story. So Gabe, I would love if you would just introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. My name is Gabe Howard. I live with bipolar 1 disorder, and I wrote a book called Mental Illness is an Asshole and Other Observations. I also host a podcast called Inside Bipolar, which you can find, of course, on all your favorite podcast players, or you can head over to psychcentral.com/IBP, which is Inside Bipolar. And then you can learn anything else you want to know about me at gabehoward.com. I guess those are my credentials, right?
Yeah.
I'm a speaker and I do stuff. Like I never know what to say in these introductions, right?
No,
I'm
that's
married
my
and I have a
favorite.
dog. That's what I got.
Yes, there you go. That's a perfect introduction. I love it so much. Yes, absolutely go listen to the podcast. It's amazing. I've listened to it, buy the book, do all the things, because once you get to know Gabe during this interview, you are going to want to learn more. So, Gabe, I would love to just roll it back and talk about when you first noticed maybe something wasn't right, or maybe you didn't notice and someone told you. I'd love to go back to the beginning and hear about your story.
So here's I think it's a fascinating thing. If you would have asked me an hour before I was admitted to a psychiatric hospital where I was ultimately diagnosed with bipolar disorder, if I had any sort of mental illness or mental health problems whatsoever, I would have answered unequivocally, no. No, I'm perfectly normal and fine in every way. And I've had a lot of time to reflect back. This was all the way back in 2003, but the reality is, of course, I was born this way. So this is how I always thought. It's how I always felt. It's how my brain always worked. It was normal to me. So I understood mental illness to be abnormal. Well, if you're
Mm,
mentally ill, that's normal. So abnormal, I guess, would be like what, like sunshine and roses, I guess. I I don't know. It
right.
it it was all normal to me. So the very start of my story is somebody walking up to me and asking me if I was planning on killing myself. And I said yes. I thought this was normal. I thought that everybody was thinking about this. Just you think that mental health education is a problem today in what 2023? No, 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 no. You should have seen mental health education in like 1990,
Wow.
2000, right? Like if it's shitty today, it was
Yeah.
shittier back then. So I had none. I had zero education. So once again, completely shocked. The person who asked me this, I answered yes. She freaked out, took me to the emergency room, and we're now back at the beginning of the story. I was admitted
Yeah.
to a psychiatric hospital where I received a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. I was 26 years old, and like I said, I didn't think anything was wrong with me, and I woke up in a psychiatric hospital.
Wow. And what do you think that that person saw? Like, were they a medical professional, or they just noticed things? Or what did they ever tell you?
Oh yeah, I was erratic. I was erratic as all get out. The uh, they were not a medical professional. I want to answer
Okay.
that. They were
Yeah.
just a person who had basic mental health education.
Right.
Just she went to college and took psychology 101.
Okay.
Mental health education was just swirling around her in more than zero, right? Like I
Gotcha.
had zero, whereas
Hmm.
she had more. I can't quantify how much more, but
Yeah.
when I'm at none,
Yeah.
what is that saying in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. I was the blind, so maybe she had blurry vision. I don't know, but she had enough. And what she
Wow.
described in the few months that she knew me is that my behavior was all over the place. One minute I was, this confident, life of the party, energetic guy who, she liked.
Yep.
And then the next minute I'm garbage and I hate myself and I'm
Mm,
mopey and she didn't like. And then in some cases I'm intelligent, right? I'm like, I'm speaking and she's enjoying the conversation, and then the next time she calls me it's like word salad, just of nonsense.
right.
Then when the depression hit, it stayed around for a little bit. So
Mm,
here in a couple of weeks she started noticing, like, wait a minute, this guy's not making plans for the future.
mm,
He's selling his house, and he rented this apartment that's just a really crappy apartment. And
mm.
of course I rented that apartment because that was my suicide plan. I didn't want to stigmatize my house, and I was
Wow.
afraid if I died in my house it wouldn't be able to sell for as much, which is not true, by the way, but at the time I believed it. And so I didn't want to stigmatize the property, because even though my life had no value, the things that I owned had value. So I wanted my family to be able to sell it and get the money. So I rented this really shitty apartment, and she's like, wait a minute, why? This guy, he can afford a nicer apartment. Why did he rent this garbage apartment in the sketchy side of town, when his house is in the nice side of town? And so all of these things made her kind of put together, I think something's wrong with this guy. I'm going to ask a few questions and see what I get.
That is fascinating. So, wow, the stigma of the property. That's so interesting. So, when she said that to you and took you to the hospital, were you compliant?
So here's the thing. I thought she was nuts. I just want to be really clear,
Yeah.
right? She said, Gabe, we need to go to the hospital. And I said,
Yeah.
why do we need to go to the hospital? I'm not sick. And then she said, no, we need to go to the emergency room. And I said, why do we need to go to the emergency room? The emergency room is where you go when you fall off the roof, or when you have a car accident, or when you have a heart attack. The emergency room is not where you go when you make the very reasonable decision to end your own life, right? So
Right.
I just thought she was, I just thought she was nuts.
Wow.
But she was smart.
Okay.
She was smart. She said, I'll tell you what, let's go to the hospital. Let's go to the emergency room, and we'll ask the doctor if this is where you need to be. And if this is not where you need to be, I will buy you dinner anywhere in the city. So even in my delusional, depressed, and suicidal state, I still had the overwhelming desire to win an argument. And free food tastes better. I
Does
mean, free food just tastes better. So we hopped in the car, we drove to the emergency room, and a lot of things happened, and just it's all in my keynote speech, so I don't want to ruin it for anybody. But the bottom line is, she was right. This is in fact where I needed to be.
yeah.
But the point that I always like to make to people is, she knew that she couldn't order me to go to the hospital. She knew that she couldn't by force of anything, but she also knew that I was not in my right mind and she could trick me.
Yeah.
And this is a powerful tool, and one that I advocate for,
Mm,
over and over and over again. Listen, people who aren't in their right mind, I'm this is a tough statement to say, because people always hear it negatively, but people who are
hmm
not in their right mind are easier to manipulate. Now,
mm,
unfortunately, 9 times out of 10, they're being manipulated for a bad reason, to steal their
mm,
money, or
mm-hmm.
to harm them in some way. But the same principle applies for good people. For good
Mm,
people, first responders, law enforcement, family members, they're not in their right mind. Utilize that for their own good and protection.
yeah.
Again, we see it work over and over again when people rob them blind. So if we're trying to get people care, you're just not going to be able to rationally reason with somebody who is irrational and mentally ill. And yet, time and time again, we try. Well, I explained them to their rights and they didn't listen, so I tased them. You,
Right.
what was wrong with you?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a really true statement, because it shocks me that a lot of professionals, police, those kinds of things, that they don't have like mental health first aid, because you can de-escalate, like you're saying, in different ways than someone that is in their right mind. Um yeah, that's really powerful, because it's true, especially if you're hypomanic or manic, when you think you know everything. Or I think that everyone else just doesn't know the things I know. So I don't trust them. I'm like,
Of course, we're
okay,
magical. We know everything.
we are so magical. We have the key to fixing all the things. I always think I have the key, before I was medicated, that I had the key to like make everything harmonious. Like I can help get this world to be more peaceful. That's like the justice side of me. Wow, that's so interesting. So then, are you, remind me, are you in Canada? Yes,
No,
because
no,
see,
I'm in America.
you are in America.
I am. I'm in Ohio,
Okay, okay.
the
I'm
most
just
exciting state in all of the union.
there you go. So then, I'm curious about your stay at the psych ward. And just for anybody listening, the way that Gabe might remember it, he was ill, so we all remember things differently, and how they are. But I really want to hear your experience. But first, I want to say to someone, a lot of people have good experiences, a lot of people have bad experience. That does not mean that you should not go, right? If you are thinking of, unaliving yourself, that is a better place to be. And sometimes in Canada, we don't have an in between. You either have, I think it's like a year and a half waiting list for a psychiatrist, or if you even have the teeniest of crisis, you have to go to the emergency room. And people are very scared of that. But you know what? We want you to be here. So please, please, please go. Despite what anybody tells you, their experiences there, it can keep you alive. So with all that being said, I would love to hear about your experience there. Like, how long did you stay? What are your memories there? What stuck out to you?
So I was there for about 3.5 days.
Okay.
I was admitted later at night, and I got out later in the evening. And so it wasn't a very long stay, and whether that's good or bad, it just that's the way that it was. I was released into a step down program, so I
Okay.
was only overnight for the 3.5 nights, and then I went into a step down program where I slept in my own house, but I went back for 8 hours. So I
Okay.
effectively went back to the same place, but just instead of being behind the locked doors, I was allowed to leave at the end of the day and had more freedom, etc., but still participated in all the same programs. That's it's called intensive outpatient therapy. So you get the same therapy, except you're not locked in. And I don't know how they determined that I qualified for that, but I largely suspect it's based on what my insurance would pay for,
Mm,
and the fact that I did have somebody to watch me at home.
right.
Whereas perhaps if I didn't have a supportive family, or people to look over me, they may not have released me, or who knows.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Largely, I define my experience as it was traumatic,
mm,
and but it's not traumatic in the rage against the machine, shake your fist kind of
okay.
thing. It's traumatic in the I imagine if you have a quadruple heart bypass,
Mm-hmm.
that would be traumatic. But
Mm-hmm.
you're not mad at the doctors. You're not mad at the hospital. I'm not mad at anybody. I'm not mad at anything. What I am resentful for is how little care was given to me after the fact. And
Mm,
the area that I like to point people to is, I said quadruple bypass for a reason.
mm,
Could you imagine if you were having a heart surgery, whether it's one, two, or double bypass, all four of them, whatever, and it was the night before, and you said that you were scared, and somebody looked you in the eyes and said, "What's wrong with you? This is for your own good. You want to die? You want to have a heart attack? Is that what you want? We're just trying to help you. You don't even care. Well, you just hate all the doctors. You think you know more than them." People would be like, what are you doing? This person's having bypass surgery on their heart, and you're
mm,
doing that to them? Okay,
yeah.
pull out quadruple bypass and put in any mental health thing. Well, now all of a sudden, well, that's reasonable. Well, of course you
Mm,
would yell at them. They were just trying to help them. Well,
mm,
wait a minute. What happened there? And can you imagine if when the person got out, right? So
yeah.
they had the surgery, right? And they're like, that was terrifying. I was scared. I was sick and I felt bad, etc. And somebody said, well, what did you want us to do? Just let you die of a heart attack? We're just going to leave you at home to die? You're not
Mm,
even thankful of all these people helping you. I
mm,
just, but people, when I got out of the hospital, I got a lot of for your own good conversations. Well, it
Oh,
was for your own good. Maybe you'll get your act together now. Maybe
oh,
this is a wake up call. Maybe this is rock bottom for you. And I go back to the heart attack thing because people on the heart attack side get that sometimes, especially if they've decided that the heart attack was because of their diet or their lack of
mm,
exercise or their weight. And we always have these very robust conversations online of, hey, look, if your loved one is overweight and eats nothing but bacon and has a heart attack, when is the right time to say, look, you need to make lifestyle changes? And
mhm.
most people agree it's not the day they get out of the hospital from
Right.
the triple heart bypass, the quadruple heart bypass. I know the bypasses change a lot in my story, but it's really just to keep you interested. I point all this out
Yeah.
because the way that we're handling physical health and the way that we're handling mental health is very different. The way that we handle mental health is very accusatory. I felt
Mm,
very accused. I felt like
mm,
it was my fault. And here's the most important part. I believed it. I believed it.
mm.
I was not a mental health advocate at the time. I was
Yeah.
scared. I was newly diagnosed. And when all these people told me that it was my fault and that I needed to be grateful, I internalized that, which of course did not help me get better.
Yeah. Yeah. That's powerful. It's so interesting. I have said to my husband before, like, I wish that, my symptom of irritability or my symptom of, thinking I know everything, or just another symptom of just, thinking the world is garbage, all of, and not being able to pull myself out. I would rather be bleeding because people would pay attention and be like, are you okay? Do you need like a band-aid? What can we do to help? Meanwhile, a lot of the symptoms of bipolar disorder, I feel like people attribute it more to a personality flaw, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And that's
Yes.
so hard because I'm like, I don't feel like I am a really angry person. But what people don't understand is that rush over my body and how I feel isn't like, I can't just say, oh, okay, Shaley, just stop that immediately. You need to think more positively. It's like an uphill battle to try and calm my nervous system, or do the things that I need to do. And pre-medication, I didn't even have reflective capacity to be able to know that this was, something that I was dealing with. So I think what you've brought up is so, so, so important. I'm curious, what do you think would have helped? Like, what's something that someone could have said that you would have found more helpful?
These are always very hard questions to answer.
True.
So, and I want to point that out for the listeners because what I might find useful or helpful, other people may be like, oh my God, that would be terrible.
Yes.
Also, the world is very complicated. So, for example, what I would have found helpful from my mom would have been her to give
Mm,
me a big hug and say, it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. Like
yeah.
that would have been very, very helpful. But obviously, if I went back to work and my boss gave me a really big hug and said, we're going to get through this, that
Awkward.
that would have been less helpful.
Yes.
So depending on your relationship with the person, et cetera, it's going to vary a lot. But the theme that I want everybody to understand is I really wish it would have been addressed more positively.
Mm,
You can do it.
mm,
This is a scary thing to be diagnosed with, but let's work together. How can I help? And where your role is really going to matter. Like, for example, I do wish my mom would have done more cheerleading. And I want to be clear, my mom was very supportive.
yeah.
My mom was not, she would, my family was actually like wildly supportive. And in the grand scheme of things, they did the absolute best that they could with the fact that they also had zero knowledge about mental
Right.
illness as well. Right. So they're learning on the fly too.
Mm-hmm.
But the one theme that they had was that for your own good mentality.
Mm,
It was take your pills. Well, I'm having this side effect. So if you don't take them, you're going to be sick again.
yeah.
I would have liked them, Gabe, take your pills. Look, they're causing me these side effects. Okay, what's the side effect? Let's write this down. Let's get this to the doctor. And
Mm,
again, I understand that they were not trying to be mean, right? When
yes.
they're like, no, you take those pills. You take what they're worried about is me trying to kill myself again, me ending
Yeah.
up in the psychiatric hospital again, me hurting myself or seeing demons and trying to drive my car off a cliff. They're worried I'm
Right.
going to die.
Yeah, they're
That's where
scared.
their energy is coming
Mm-hmm.
from.
Mm-hmm.
But I would have liked them to take a deep breath
Yeah.
and maybe done a, Gabe, it's important that you don't go off your medication, but it's also important we report this to the doctor and work diligently to reduce the side effects. And like, I would have liked more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I would have liked it from all of the people in my life, depending on where they were. All of the attitude was, get your shit together and do it because you almost died, and wow, that would have been your fault.
Oh,
And that's a lot. That's a lot to take.
yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry that happened. I hear you. I hear you so deeply with that. I think sometimes we don't, we also, it's almost like they see us differently. So it's like we can't, they don't trust us to tell them what we might need, right? And I find that too about, you said that really clearly about the side effects, right? Because I've been on medicine forever. My one big side effect that I hate, is that it feels impossible to get up in the morning, right? It's
Right.
impossible. And I know there's people that, like, when I do and am like my job or my kids or whatever, when I can sleep in, I know that from the outside, there's people think that like I'm lazy, right? Or meanwhile, it's like I am on this heavy duty medication to knock me out. I am trying my best to get up, and I just have internalized that, right? Like I really have had to undo that in therapy, that, I'm more lazy than the average person. I'm not helping myself because I don't get up, at the crack of dawn and do, this perfect morning routine. And I thought that was really important that you brought that up. When someone would say to me, that sounds really hard. And I know for me personally, it's a payoff, right? Like not taking the medication is way worse. But the fact that I have to pick one of two bad things, I would love to hear still, that sounds really hard.
See, and there's where exactly. Like I don't want to just repeat everything that you said, but I cannot put
Mm,
enough emphasis. Like I want to amplify what you said. I
mm,
really wish there was more. This is really hard. I'm always thinking my brain. I always think in my brain like the person who got in like a car accident and doesn't have the ability to walk, so they have to go through physical therapy, right?
yeah,
So that everybody's seen this in the TV shows and the movies. It's got like the two bars, right? And they're using the bars to hold them. And there's like a physical therapist like, okay, move your foot, move. You can do it. You can do it. And the person's like, they got a hold of it and they're struggling and they're just trying to lift that foot up. That's all they want to do is just lift that foot up and move it like 1 inch. And
yeah,
they're holding on to that thing. Maybe they're in a harness. They're doing it. And the guy's like, you can do it. You can do it. The people around him are like, we believe in you. And then in every movie, pop culture, TV show, they're able to move that foot like an inch, and then everybody cheers,
yeah,
right? Where is that? I
yes,
don't know exactly what that would look like. I
mm,
recognize it's not as simple, and I do know that it's not as simple. But
mm,
where is it? Where
yeah,
is the round of applause? Where is the, oh my God, Gabe, you did it? And I'm not saying that I've never received compliments. I'm
yes,
not. I feel like they're really few and far between, and there's no
mm,
great big applause moments. And
mm,
I really think there deserves to be more. And listen, I'm a person living with bipolar disorder, and I'm not even sure where to put them. So this is really, really complicated. But you opened up the Pandora's box of what would you have liked to see.
yeah,
I would have liked to have seen a lot more praise for what I have accomplished
yeah.
instead of a lot more pointing out of how far I had to go.
Yes, yes. Like some days it's climbing a mountain that I got out of bed, that I walked to the end of the street, right? And I do this thing on Instagram. It's called Wednesday Wins, and I just say to people like the smallest thing, because that too, like we can trick our brains a little bit. Those small things, you can feel, good about them. I'm like, celebrate anything, celebrate. Like today I did not want to be alive and I am still here. And I think that that's, as powerful and as brave as, getting a promotion. It's kind of what our society values, right? And I think that sometimes, especially, I don't know if you find this, for someone like me and you, that's an advocate, or that is probably seen at our, at our best, and we're out there. So sometimes I find, people just think that well, she's okay now. She has her medication. And I was speaking to a college class, and they said, well, you take your medication, so you're fixed. And I think it's really important, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, for people to understand that it is lifelong and chronic. And it doesn't matter if I do all the things right. My episodes are muted, but I still get episodes. And I feel, even now, sometimes I feel shame. Like, I'll feel like, oh, here you go, you're here again. And so sometimes I won't talk to people about it, because I feel like, oh, they're going to roll your eyes because you're saying the same things, or you're having the same symptoms. And I'm wondering your thoughts about that, or your experience with with that.
Yeah, isn't this the it's like this like the bipolar hypocrisy. I don't know what else to call it. It's like, I want you to treat me the same as everybody else. I am a person, and you will treat me identically to everybody else.
Yeah.
And then but wait a minute, I'm going to need some special accommodations. And I also want you to understand that sometimes I'm symptomatic, and I do still suffer. And you know what, I deserve the credit for when I don't want to get out of bed, and yet I do. And the people were looking around like, what happened to that treat me like everybody else? Like,
Yeah.
where did that go? And I try to be mindful of the people with bipolar disorder have to understand that when we're being ignored, it's not because we have bipolar disorder. It's just because that's the way the world works.
Yeah.
And I think that's important, because for me, I internalize a lot. Like, why do people not give me the credit for struggling? But then I think about it, I'm like, they also don't give me credit for going to work, or for
Yeah.
getting married, or for taking care of my dog, or for buying a car, or for making my payments on time, or for mowing my lawn, or you know what? They don't give me credit for anything. It's
Yeah.
not like they give me credit for all of this other stuff, and then when it gets to bipolar disorder, they withdraw it. They're
Mm.
they're not giving me credit for anything. In fact, they don't even know my middle name. Now that I think
Mm.
about it, I don't even think they know my last name. Now that I
Mm.
think about it, I don't even think they know my first name.
Oh.
and I point all this out not to make people sad, but in reality, this is just how the world works, and it's what we're doing as well.
Mm.
So in this way, it's good. But now we get to like that core, right? That core, mom, dad, spouses,
Yeah.
our besties, our siblings. There's where I want to see the attention do better. So then I
Mm.
ask people with bipolar disorder this: how are you giving the people in your life credit? How are you
Mm.
honoring them? What are you doing? Are you telling your brother and your sister that, hey, it's hard raising three kids and having two full-time jobs, and don't worry about the fact that your house is a mess. This isn't a big thing. Are you offering to take anything off their plate? Hey, look, I'll take the kids every Thursday, or whatever. Just what are you doing to praise them about the challenges that they have in their lives? And
Mm.
a lot of times people with bipolar disorder are like, well, I don't know that they're having challenges as bad as mine. Look, it's not the suffering Olympics. Didn't say as bad as yours, but there's got to be a challenge. I'm like, I don't know. And I'm like, really? Your parents who are older than you aren't having challenges? They're
Mm.
look, I just turned 47, and it's harder to walk up a flight of stairs. So I got to
Mm.
imagine my 74-year-old father, he might use a hand. He
Yeah.
might need some help with some stuff around the house. He might need to be told, Dad, I know it hurts when you walk, and yet you still come out with us to restaurants, malls, etc., even though you're exhausted at the end of the day. I'm proud of you for that, because you could sit at home. I don't do that. Even though I'm saying I should, and that's a true story, never going to do it. It's not going to happen. So
Mm.
I think when I wrap all this up into a nice tiny bow, we're all guilty of it. Just
Mm.
for some reason, when it happens to us, we internalize it a little more, and we decide that it's stigma. I don't know
Yeah.
that it's so much stigma as it is just, the world kind of sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that when uh, some of my closest friends, or people that I've just surrounded myself now, I feel like we have those. It's so important to have those deeper conversations, to have, just go deeper. Because I feel like there's some people that I would have never thought I would have had certain conversations with. But once I was vulnerable and I brought, my needs to the table, other people were able to do that too. And I think we all have these, unspoken needs, and there's always been this, suck it up mentality and put your best foot forward kind of thing. And I'm just noticing just this beautiful connection that you can have with people when we can all see each other's struggle. And you're right, if we're not being honest or asking, like taking an interest in other people's struggles, then you're right. Why would someone do the same? I'm gonna be thinking about that for a while. That's really interesting. I find that I'm trying to, work on my language. I refuse to say, I try to say not just how are you? It's such a big question. That's why we say fine. That's why we say, because it's such a big question. I'll be like, how are you today? Or, how are you feeling? Because I get overwhelmed. And so then I just say the easy answer. But if someone's, asking me how was your day today? Or, how has your November been or December been treating you so far? I just think those are such beautiful questions. I have a question for you. And I know this differs from everyone, but one of the things I've just been realizing is that I actually like it when people ask me about my bipolar disorder, when people ask me where I'm at, or, am I experiencing any symptoms? To me, that just shows this deep level of care and wanting to understand my illness is like, it's such a beautiful thing. Do you like people asking you? Would that mean anything to you? How do you feel about people bringing it up? Because I find that people wait till I bring it up, and I love when people ask me.
I am in the U camp. I love it when people ask me about my bipolar disorder, with the small caveat of, like anything, sometimes I'm just trying to, eat dinner.
Yes.
Like maybe not today.
Yeah.
Can we
Yeah.
talk about it tomorrow? I am human, but
Yeah.
I didn't do this job accidentally.
Mm.
It's a fascinating thing in my life where I get criticized for liking to talk. Well, Gabe likes to talk. Well, Gabe likes to talk. Well, Gabe's going to dominate the conversation. Well, Gabe's always talking. Look at Gabe talking about himself again. And then somebody's like, okay, well, what does Gabe do for a living? Oh, he talks about himself. I just, well, was he successful at it? Yeah, yeah. People seem to really like what he has to say, and he's really, broken down a lot of barriers and really helped people become, like advocates. He's learned a lot. He's made a lot of friends. He's really built this entire career and tribe and life around this thing that we just criticize. Oh, okay.
Mm.
So now what do you do with that? Right? I come from a very quiet, and you know what? I don't come from a quiet family. I come from a humble family. We are
Mm.
loud. We are obnoxious. We're terrible people. But we have this we have this vein of humility
Mm.
that is a core value of my family's. And for the most part, this is a good thing. I want to be very, very clear. This is a
Yeah.
good thing. But you know how they say that every cloud has a silver lining? Well,
Mm.
every silver lining has a cloud. This is the
Mm.
downside. And the problem with humility, and the problem with being raised to be so humble, is that there are times that you need to stand up and say, look, I live with bipolar disorder and I spoke at Oxford. I live with bipolar disorder and I spoke at the National Press Club. I spoke at Oxford and I have a governor's award handed to me by the governor of my state for being an everyday hero, right? I've got it
Mm.
framed. I have accomplished these incredible things even though I live with bipolar disorder. Now, half of the audience right now has rolled their eyes. They're just like, ugh,
Mm.
humble brag. No, that's just a straight up brag. It's not a humble brag. I am actually bragging. And other people are like, wow, that's really amazing. You've accomplished a lot. And you just never know who you're talking to. But here's the
True.
reality. When I say I'm a person living with bipolar disorder, will you listen to me to make the lives of people better who have bipolar
Mm.
disorder? No. No, I'm not going to listen to a crazy dude. Well, why the hell should I listen to you? And that's where my resume comes very much into play. And then
Mm.
when I start giving it, I become triggered because now I'm just bragging. Why are you
Mm.
doing that, Gabe? You didn't do this for the attention. Well, but except that in order to be good at a podcast, you must have attention. So I
It's
guess I
true.
did do it for the attention, but I'm supposed to do it for the greater good, not for the attention. Okay, but what
Mm.
happens when the attention drives the greater good? And those
Ooh.
are the struggles that I have like in my life,
Mm.
right? It's a fascinating thing to consider, but in this world, you are supposed to be humble, but in order to rise to the top, people must also know that you deserve to be at the top. So
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck figuring that out. So my
Yeah.
family rolls their eyes at me a lot, but it's okay. I'm used to it.
But you know what? I feel that a lot of people think that the diagnosis is like a death sentence or like that their life is ruined. I know so many people that, don't think that they're going to get married or don't think that that's in their future. And so I think that sometimes us putting ourselves out there and talking about the things we have done or we have accomplished give a lot of people hope. Uh, you know, and I think I like to just press into like I am average and I struggle. I still have, bipolar disorder. I still, sometimes struggle to get out of bed. I still deeply offend people with when I am hypomanic and think that all my ideas are the very best ideas. But, but I am here and I think that in my own way, it looks very different than maybe what I thought of. Like I am flourishing and I think that it's beautiful what you're doing. I think that it's great that you're telling others because you're showing people that they could do it too, or they can manage their bipolar uh, and be able to do these great things. For some people right now, if you're struggling to get out of bed and you're like, these two yahoos are telling me things that, I could never do. I see you. And that's you getting out of bed might be your award on the wall today, but just know that it is possible that, there would I have been able to do this right after my diagnosis? No, I wouldn't. So everyone's at their different spots, but yeah, that's good stuff, and I will hear about all your accomplishments whenever you want to tell, and I want to know your middle name.
Oh, I'm not giving anybody my middle name, but it starts with an E.
Starts with an E. Okay, that'll be the guess. I'll put that on Instagram. Guess Gabe's middle name. I love it.
Nice,
I
nice,
love
nice.
it so much.
It's a fascinating world in which we live
Mm,
because I used to be in fundraising for a long time. And of
mm,
course, one of the things that people say is, well, if you give money and brag about it, that's bad. And a
mm.
lot of people hear that, like, well, of course, you should give money because you want to give money, not because you want the credit. You should give money because you want to give credit. No, okay, but here's the problem with that. You have now given money. So you have said this charity is worthwhile or this cause is worthwhile. You have reached into your wallet, which is a very high bar, pulled
Mm,
money out and given it to that charity. And then you don't tell any of your circle that you've done it.
right.
Now I've got to start over. Now I have already convinced this person to give money. Now I got to go to their friend and convince them
Mm,
because and they're like, well, it's an anonymous donation, so don't say anything. But 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 so I scream it from the rooftops, right? I'm like, I donated money to this mental health charity. I gave them $1,000, and everybody's like, humble bragger.
mm,
Oh my god, he thinks he's so good. But all the other people were like, well, now wait a minute, we trust Gabe. We know that Gabe has vetted this charity. And
yeah.
the reason that we know we can trust Gabe is because Gabe voted with his wallet. Gabe pulled
Mm,
$1,000 out of his wallet and gave it to this charity. So I now feel comfortable giving my 25, 50, 100, 500,000, 20,000.
yeah.
And when we think about why this is so important, I want these causes to do well. That's why I donated my money. So
Mm,
let's say that I give this cause $100 and then 100 other people give this cause $100. Well, suddenly the corporation down the street is like, those 100 people shop here. So we're going to
mm.
go ahead and give them a $20,000 grant. So
Wow.
suddenly, just by telling everybody and their brother that I donated $1,000, this charity that I care about has 50 grand.
Yeah.
Now, maybe you work for cancer. right? Maybe maybe your charity of choice is cancer, and one of the cancers that is not forgotten, and it has a lot of money, and gets a lot of corporate sponsorships, and isn't hurting for cash. I would argue that everybody's hurting for cash, but again, we're
Mm,
playing a little bit of the profitable suffering Olympics. But like everything becomes pink during certain months,
mm,
right? We don't have this in mental health. So mental health needs a lot of word of mouth.
yes.
And people have been trained not to talk about donating money at all. So we're
Right.
not getting the word of mouth.
Yeah.
And then we say things like, well, there's not enough beds, there's not enough resources, there's not enough people. And I'm like, well, if you started talking more about it, and they're like, no, 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 then I would
Yeah.
be a braggart. And I
Yeah.
know we've fallen down this like weird esoteric rabbit hole, but I really do believe that this is what ties into, and it's an excellent analogy and an excellent segue into this is what happens when people living well with bipolar disorder don't brag about it. Because
Mm,
listen, this is very important.
mm,
Crisis is always public. Anytime
yes.
somebody has a crisis with bipolar disorder, everybody will hear about it. But when you have a success with bipolar disorder, nobody hears about it. So
Yes.
when the general public says, well, the people with bipolar disorder are always problematic, people with bipolar disorder never get better, people with bipolar disorder are violent, people with bipolar disorder never get jobs, people with bipolar disorder never accomplish anything, people with bipolar disorder are always on welfare, people with bipolar disorder, okay, they've heard about all of that and they've seen it. Now, where's the rest of us? Where are the people
Wow.
who are saying, well, but there's also Gabe, Shaley, and I can't think of Natasha, Lori. Where are those people standing up and counterbalancing it? But
Yeah.
I also understand the reason to hide. So
Yes.
I this is how complicated this mess is because many
Yes.
people who are living well with bipolar disorder choose to just keep their mouth shut because
Yeah.
frankly they don't just need the trouble. They
Yeah.
don't need the problems.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true, and it doesn't feel safe for a lot of people. You're right.
It doesn't.
Yeah, I know. I'm with you. I'm like, where are the movies? Like, is it just that it's more interesting for people to fall apart? I know every time I'll be watching a movie and there'll be like this mom, and then she'll get wild, and she's usually an artist, and then
Oh, of
she leaves,
course.
and I'm like, oh, they're totally going to say she has bipolar. And I'm like, you know what? I can't paint to save my life. So stop, stop, stop. Right? You're right. And I tell people too, advocacy is as easy, not as easy. I take that back. Advocacy is like even telling one person, right? Maybe you're not like Gabe and I, and you don't love a microphone, but telling one person, telling the next person, sharing your story, it looks different for everyone. But if every, person tells one person, and this is where I also talk to, and I know we have a lot of listeners that just love someone with bipolar disorder. You know what? Things are very hard for us. We would love if you would advocate for us. We would love if you're like, hey, I have this friend. When someone might say, oh, the weather's so bipolar, you could say, actually, this is a serious illness. But also, my friend is, very successful, or this bipolar doesn't look like in the movies. It looks like this. Because chances are, even if you don't think you know someone with bipolar, you probably do. You
You really
probably do.
probably do, and even if it's not bipolar disorder, it's some sort of mental illness, and
Yes.
I I know that's like an esoteric hole to fall down, but many I would argue that in the course of a lifetime, everybody will have a mental health crisis,
Mm-hmm.
and people really push back hard on that. They're like, everybody's going to have a mental health crisis. Yes, if a loved one dies, how well you doing?
Yeah.
I just and everybody like suddenly is shocked. I'm like, because if you tell me that you are perfectly mentally healthy after the death of a very close loved one, like really, like that's
Mm.
really messed up. Like that
Yeah.
didn't mess you up at all. Like
Yeah.
your parent, your spouse, your grandparent, your child passes away, and you're like, no, I'm fine mentally.
Yeah.
Wow. That and
Yeah.
then people say, no, 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 but I have a reason. Look,
Yeah.
that's what are you doing? Just stop. It doesn't matter that you have a reason. It matters that you're suffering. It matters that you have a problem. And I got to tell you that the world doesn't, if I get poison ivy, I have a reason too. It's because I touched a poison ivy plant. That
Mm.
doesn't make the poison ivy less dangerous.
Right.
Just, who cares? But we have all these little excuses for why we aren't mentally ill or why we
Mm.
aren't having a mental health crisis. Now, I do recognize that bipolar disorder is a serious and persistent mental illness. It's a
Hmm.
lifetime thing. It's not the same as a mental health crisis like,
Yeah.
grief or transitional periods like empty nesters, like when your parents
Yeah.
or when kids move out or things like that, or if you lose your job or if you
Mhm.
retire. I understand that there's lots of things that can cause a mental health crisis which are temporary
Yes.
versus serious
Yeah.
and persistent mental illness like bipolar disorder. But I think if more people could tap into that idea, it would be just like physical health,
Hmm.
which, even though I have never had a serious and persistent physical health problem, I've
Yeah.
never had a physical health problem that I will have for the rest of my life. I
Mm.
have been sick. And
Yeah.
because I understand those experiences of being better, when somebody says to me, "Hey, Gabe, I'm going to be sick for the rest of my life with fill in the blank," I understand the seriousness.
Yeah.
I'm not so cavalier about it. I think if people could understand that they really are experiencing mental health struggles and then
Yeah.
they go away, they would understand us more because they'd be
Yeah.
like, oh my God, it's like that for you. It's like
Yeah.
after my loved one died, except for you, it's forever.
Yeah. And for no
Exactly.
reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think that that's really important that you said. Like, I think if we all wrap our heads around the idea that everyone has mental health and it's not always good, there's mental health and then mental illness, right? And if people talk about when their mental health isn't good, it kind of opens the door for talking about what that looks like when you actually deal with that all the time. I saw this really cool thing that said, you can still have mental illness and have good mental health. And I thought, no, I'll never have that because I have mental illness. But no, I actually do, because I don't have a choice but to use to find tools and use tools to manage. So someone that doesn't, admit that, they might be not doing well, or even when they're doing well, they might not do those things to stay mentally well, right? And I thought that that was really interesting, because I was always like, oh, I'll never be able to say I have, decent mental health. But I do, because I take care of that. But I do have a mental illness. I don't know. I've been wrestling with that idea and thinking about that. I'd love to change gears, and I'd love to be able to talk about like your symptoms and your experiences, and maybe some of the things that you feel. I know it helps a lot of our bipolar folks that are listening to see ourselves in those symptoms. And then I would love to hear some of the things that you do to manage your bipolar disorder.
Well, what do we want to take first? Where do we want to start?
I want to start with what kind of symptoms do you still experience?
The I no longer experience psychosis.
Mm.
That is thankfully behind me. Hopefully,
Yeah.
it's controlled by medication, and I really no longer experience mania. Remember I'm bipolar 1, so I have the
Yes.
full blown I am God.
Yes.
I would argue that I really don't experience hypomania. I go back and forth on that one. There's been a couple of times that I've been like really, really excited, and somebody has said, well, that's hypomania. And I'm like, well, I mean, m- maybe, but
Mm.
aren't I allowed to just be really excited? I mean, like exciting things are happening. So it makes
Yeah.
me think that maybe it's not hypomania. Like if it was
Yeah.
just, in the middle of nowhere, oh my God, I'm so excited. Why? It's Thursday. Like then I might be more inclined to.
Yeah.
So I do feel I only
It's
point
so
that out because
hard, right? To know,
yeah,
am I happy or am I hypomanic? But you're right. If it makes sense, like if someone else would be excited about this, I'm allowed to be excited about this.
right, right. So that's always a tough one. So I don't really feel like I reach hypomania, but I will admit it is possible. I
Mm.
am not so bold as to conclusively say that I have never experienced a hypomanic episode in my recovery. Where I really spend a lot of my time is fine. I'm fine. I'm normal,
Yep.
stereotypical, average, whatever word
Yep.
you want to use. And depression. Now, depression is one of those things that unfortunately there's only like one layer of depression apparently that we're allowed to discuss. So
Right.
if you are feeling down and defeated, like, oh, I can't accomplish anything, and you're suicidal, we call both of those things depression.
Right.
So what I have sort of done is broken it out to It's sort of like a three pack, right? We've got depression, we've got immobile depression, and we've got suicidal depression. These are not medical terms. I want to be very, very clear. They're
Yeah.
just sort of the way I classify it in my own head. Depression, or functional depression, as I sometimes call it. I am depressed. I am down. It's heavy on me. I feel like I'm wearing concrete shoes, but I'm still
Wow.
productive.
Yes.
I'm still going to work.
Yeah.
I'm still getting things done. I'm still meeting my requirements. Immobile depression is, I'm not suicidal. I'm not in any danger. I'm not even thinking about it, right? I'm not saying it might not be like the neighbor who's starting to turn up the stereo, but I'm not in any danger right now. But you know what? I'm calling off work.
Mm.
I'm canceling that recording. I'm not. I'm not moving. You know what? I'm not moving. And then there's suicidal depression. I spend the majority of my time between immobile depression
Mm.
and pretty much fine,
Okay.
with a couple of blips of happy here and there, um, and and that's not so bad. It
Mm.
really isn't. But before treatment, it was godlike mania, suicidal depression,
Right.
middle. Like,
Yep.
I'm not saying I was in the middle. I'm not, the middle is very important. I did, but when I was in the middle, nobody cared. I was fine, right?
Yep.
But my pretty much my only two symptoms were, I am God, bow down to me, right?
Yep.
The highest levels of mania, or I am garbage, my mother will be happy at my funeral, and that was pretty much it. So
Yep.
I consider this to be manageable, especially since, if we move on to your second question, how
Mm.
do I cope?
Yes.
Uh, First and foremost, I don't want anybody to think that I got this licked. uh,
Yes.
it just happens. I do the best that I can with what I have, and the way that I manage it is that sometimes I have to take. Back when I started, I used to say, sometimes I just have to admit I can't work today. Right.
Mm.
I can't go to work. I got to take some time. Then that evolved into, I need a self-care day. It was the exact same thing. And now it's called a mental health day. The
Mm.
bottom line is, I admit that, sometimes I'm just not going to be functional, and that's okay. And
Yeah.
not to turn what only needs to be a 1 day thing into a multi-day spiral. I just
Mm.
admit that, today I'm just gonna watch TV. I'm just gonna chill. The next thing I do is I really take a big stock of what I can accomplish.
Mm.
And I try, I want to be clear, I try not to bite off more than I can chew.
Mm.
It's Some people can get up at 5 a.m. and they can go for 16 hours, sleep for 8, and then do it all over again the next day, like when they're in the middle of a big project. Or no, no, I always have to build in 3 or 4 hours of downtime. I always have to build in some sort of activity, whether it's just watching TV mindlessly, reruns of something that are comforting, because I know how they're going to go. There's nothing
Yeah.
shocking, there's nothing surprising.
Yeah.
Whether it's go to dinner for a couple of hours with, people who I like talking to, and not talking about work, just talking about, Marvel or sports or Spider-Man, or whether Gotham City is based on New York or Chicago. Just, again, mindless, right?
Yeah.
And I build that in. Some people are like, well, in the middle of a big project, you just take 4 hours off every day. Yes, yes, I do. Yes, because I realize that it's not the quantity of hours. It's the quality
Mm.
of them. I
Yes.
can give you 16 hours. Half of them are going to suck, or I can give you 12 hours and all of them are going to be awesome. And preferably, I'm going to give you 8 hours and they're
Yeah.
all going to be awesome. And I really strive to set my life up like that. I also have dozens of coping skills that of course apply to different, sections of my life. I have a really supportive, home life and family. That's
Mm.
really important. And I really try to be honest with what I can and cannot achieve. So sometimes people offer me things and I'm like, you know what? That's just not going to happen.
Mm.
I'm not going to do that, even though I may want to. Or
Mm.
if I decide to do something, I think, okay, I can't do that the same way you can. Um,
Mm.
so how can I retrofit this for me? And the best example, people are like, well, what are you talking about? Like, okay, when I was very young, when I wanted to be a speaker, I spoke around Ohio because I could drive, Ohio and the states surrounding it, basically like an 8 hour radius. And then I got a gig in San Francisco, which I'm in Ohio. San Francisco is there's no straight through flight from Ohio to San Francisco. So it's about
Okay.
9 hours of travel with a layover. You got to change
Okay.
planes. And then there's a 3 hour time difference. You're in another time zone. California is vastly different from Ohio, just in terms of everything. And I thought, I really want to do this. Like, I
Mm.
want to do it. I want to be there. I want to be involved. So I brought a friend. I asked a friend and I said, hey, I want to be very clear. I'm bringing you, but, and I remember what I said. I don't know if anybody watches the show Monk, but remember Monk had Natalie and Sharona, right?
Okay.
So Monk, and then the Monk, he was the detective who supposedly had OCD and he solved crimes, but he had a person who followed him around and was his helper. And I said, I need you to be my Sharona, which was the first helper of Monk, like his partner,
Okay.
for lack of a
Yeah.
better word. And she was like, okay, I get to go to San Francisco for free, done. And we did it, and it was a lot of fun, and it worked out well, and it gave me a lot of confidence until eventually I can travel alone without her help anymore. But I was my choices were, if my choices were only go or not go, I would have had to choose not go.
Right.
So I was really happy that I was, I had the internal fortitude to figure out another option. How can I make this work?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that so much. And then asking for the help when you need it in order to be successful, right? And also I love what you said, if you want to do it. I always think, I used to think, well, I could do that well, surely, I can see that I can do that well, but it doesn't mean that I should, right? And it's the same, my example would be with the podcasting. I know, I'm a solo podcaster. I bring on guests. I know that I can sustain 2 a month with my teaching job. I know that I can do that. And I know that maybe I could be more successful if I did it every week. Maybe, maybe more people, I would reach more people, but I didn't want to start and go, and then it just fizzle and die, because that has happened to me so many times because I take on too much. Or I kind of always think about in my head that, like, the hypomanic me, that's how much I should be giving, right? Well, that was impossible because I wasn't sleeping. Right. So
Right,
now I
right.
try and do things that are sustainable. And sometimes I get like, oh, well, you're not a real podcaster, or you're not doing it the right way. But I think that when we adjust to, okay, well, what is the Shaley way? What is the Gabe way? I think that that's where we can find success, or not even success, but be able to follow through on something. Because I know that I had a lot of shame about not being really good and then not, right, being really great and then dropping off the face of the earth. Right. So yeah, I love that, bringing someone along, or putting the things in place that you need, right? I need a certain amount of sleep. I need to not start meetings at 6 a.m. And I think that once, I would love if everybody did that, not just bipolar folks. I think we would be such a more healthy and, productive, like the world wants us to be. Like you said, you can do awesome for this many hours. So why not just do that many hours? That's awesome.
Exactly. Be awesome for the amount of time that you can be awesome for. And
Yeah.
there's so much comparison. And look, I'm not trying to, dissect the world, but yet we all do it, bipolar or
Mm,
not, we all do it, and we do it in other areas of our life too. Right? I mean, competition is ingrained in our society. So I don't want
right.
to tell people with bipolar disorder not to compare themselves to other people, because frankly, that's just mean.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we're gonna do it. It's built in. But if you're gonna compare yourself to other people, compare yourself to the right people. And
Ah,
I'm always fascinated when, for example, and this is the best example that I have, people graduate from college, right?
yeah.
So they graduate, university, they're 22 years old, right? They get their very first job out of college, right? Or out of high school, right? But it's their very first job, it's their career. And they immediately look at their parents and they're like, I can't afford the house. I can't afford the cars. I don't understand. Why can't I afford this? I've got a job like you. And they laugh because they're like, I've had my job for 30 years. You're
Mm,
you're not comparing yourself to the right people. You just compared your first job out of school with your parents' 30-year career.
right.
That's not a comparable. And I think
Yeah.
people with bipolar disorder do this all the time. They're like, okay, well, I'm living with bipolar disorder and I've decided to become a speaker. Okay, I got a website. All right, that's good. I'm looking around. Okay, so Deepak Chopra, he seems to be doing better than me.
Wow.
That's not a comparable.
Yeah.
What are you doing? And that's obviously an extreme example, right?
Yeah.
Or they go to the first class, they go to like Toastmasters, and somebody stands up and they do their toast and like, yes, I've been working in this industry for 15 years. Like, well, I'm not as good as them. I might as well
Mm.
quit. Once
Mm.
again, not a comparable. You've never given a paid speech and you're comparing yourself to somebody who's been doing this professionally for 15 years.
Yes.
Stop it. So
Yeah.
and I haven't even gotten into the part where you add in the bipolar yet, right?
Right.
So now let's say that you have been doing it for 15 years. You're comparing yourself to somebody doing it for 15 years, and they say, "Look, I gave 100 speeches last year. That's an average of 2 a week." And you're like, I gave 25, and I feel like that's all I can handle."
Yeah.
Okay, it's not a comparable then because
Yeah.
they don't have bipolar disorder.
Right.
Go find all the other people living with bipolar disorder who are speakers and or have something else to manage and see how they're doing, and
Yeah.
then maybe you will get reasonable data. Now, I still want to say it is still good advice not to compare yourself to people.
Hmm.
I just know that we're gonna do it, and
Regardless. Yeah.
in some ways it's good.
Yeah. Some
It's
ways it
good.
motivates a little bit. Hmm.
Yeah, there really is. Listen, I'm going to compare myself to people all the time because I want to see what other people are doing. I want to see
Mm.
if there's anything that I can mimic, and I want people to mimic me too. Like I'm an equal. I always say I have an R&D department, rip off and duplicate, and I seriously, when I look out in the world and I see other podcasters, other social media influencers, other speakers doing certain things, I think, well, clearly that's what the audience wants. That's
Mm.
that people are doing it for a reason. And if the majority of people are doing it, it must be working. So I would be a damn fool not to incorporate it into my own work if
Mm.
it's appropriate for me.
Mm.
That doesn't mean I copy everything,
Yeah.
but some things I do. And it's paying attention to these things has a lot of relevance in the world, but
Mm.
utilize it for what it is. Put it in
Yeah.
its correct places, and if you're going to do market research, make it market research and don't take it so personally.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that because you can try. I think sometimes as humans, but also as bipolar folk, because we can be so hard on ourselves sometimes, we're afraid to try new things, right? Or do things that fit. We think that there's a cookie cutter way to do things. I know I've spent half my life feeling like I don't study properly, right? Because I can't sit and read something, but I have to teach something. I think like what works for you might not work for someone else, and try it anyways. Because for me, because I'm doing this all on my own and I have my other career as a teacher, I don't even have a website. I don't even have a website,
You don't have
but
a website? I got to
but
tell you, you should get a website.
I
Websites are awesome.
know. I know I need someone to make it for me. It is painful for me to do those kinds of things, right? It is painful, but you can still reach people, right? Like I thought maybe my mom and a friend would listen to the podcast, and a lot of people listen to the podcast, and a lot of people show up on Instagram, but I did it my way. Right. Sometimes I show up on Instagram. Sometimes there's spelling mistakes. I can sit at night and be like so embarrassed when I reread something. I'm like, oh my gosh. But I wouldn't, if I didn't just hit publish, I wouldn't have done it. If I had to make it perfect, I just show up as I am, and I find that more people are reached and more people are helped when I am just as I am, flaws and all, right? Whereas before, I would have wanted to make it perfect, and the podcast wouldn't even exist, right?
Oh yeah, I got to tell you, perfection gets in the way of progress more than any other thing in Gabe's life. Right?
Yes.
I have been writing a book now for 10 years and it's not perfect. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. In the meantime, the book that I was frankly embarrassed to put out, and I really I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it. I'm not putting out the book. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. No, 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 no. Is doing so well and I'm so proud of it. And
Oh,
listen, the book, honest to God, is not perfect. It's not a shameless plug, although it is. Mental
yeah.
illness is an asshole and other observations. It's not perfect. There's a couple of typos in it. Don't tell anybody.
That actually
It's a
makes me
paperback.
happy.
Yeah, it's a paperback, and I wanted a hardback. When it first came out, my picture was bad. This is the second printing where I did finally get the picture changed. And I only point all of this out because people love it. And it makes me feel so good. And
Mm.
I didn't even want to do it. And frankly, if it wasn't for the people around me who forced me to do it, it'd still
Yeah.
be sitting on my hard drive waiting to be perfected. And
Yeah.
all of those compliments, all of the good feelings that I have, all of the everything, every time I say the name of my book and people giggle, none of that would have ever happened. I mean, it's pretty
Mm.
good for an imperfect book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you're relatable. I don't want to be friends with perfect people. They don't, do you know what I mean? So I
I don't
think,
want to be
yeah.
friends with them, but I do want to be one.
Ah,
Isn't that messed up?
yeah, totally, totally. There's this thing, the way society idolizes things. Well, yes, this conversation just made me so happy. You are such a light. For those of you, so this is a perfect segue because we are going to go deeper. I have subscriptions available on Instagram, and I provide extra content. So you'll get exclusive going deeper with each of the podcast guests. So Gabe and I are actually going to do and talk about his book. So if you want to hear that part, go and subscribe on Instagram. It's $6.99 US a month, and I offer a bunch of extra things and a place to go deeper and connect, so that I can afford to do this work. And so, Gabe, thank you for all that you put out in this world. Thank you for telling us all of your accomplishments. And I just think that the work that you're putting out there is amazing. And I just hope that you keep, shouting from the rooftops your message and your story.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
This is Bipolar. Thanks again for tuning in. You can find video versions of This is Bipolar on our YouTube channel. We also have all our previous and soon to be future episodes of the podcast on Apple, Podbean, Spotify, and Google Play. We spend most of our time on Instagram at this.is.bipolar. There is a vibrant community there where we have conversations and post different ideas and different strategies, and we'd just love for you to join us there. It is so helpful if you enjoy our work or think it would be helpful to someone if you could like and share and save and follow us in all or any of those spaces. If you're a listener for the podcast, if you could leave a review, we would be forever grateful. Again, thank you for being here with us. Let's get the word out. Let's share lived experiences so that we can change the ideas that people have about bipolar and help those of us that live with it feel less alone. This is Bipolar.